So I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Tami Silverman here to Gleaners as we continue a series of conversations over the year about that convergence of hunger and health and other food insecurity issues. So as we think about the population that's been in the food line, I've certainly been particularly bothered by the number of kids as a percent of those in the food line continues to grow disproportionately. The number of grandparents and great-grandparents that are in the food line and raising grandkids has grown disproportionately. But you're from Indiana Youth Institute, so let's focus on the first part of that and maybe your sense of that connectivity between hunger and education and other developmental things we need to think about for our next generations.
Of course. Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk about this. Food underlines everything, and nutrition, and how kids have the fuel they need to do all the things we want them to do. And that's academically, and that's social and emotionally, and that's in their community, and that's developmentally, and they need fuel. And our goal is to make sure every child in Indiana has the food and has access to consistent healthy food and predictable, right? And that we can make sure they know that that's coming to them. The pandemic set a lot of families back. And so you're absolutely right. Our numbers are going up, and they're going in the wrong direction. But we need to keep paying attention, because we know that there's, as you do, there's long-term ramifications if kids don't have access to consistent healthy food.
Right. We are thinking a lot, and in fact, we've realigned job descriptions. We've realigned a lot of our strategic goals and deliverables around interconnectivity of hunger to other challenges. As we're thinking about ways we might work together, as we're thinking about what you're learning, because education is part of this, education about food insecurity and connectivity too. Synergies that come to mind?
Yes. Well, in our terms, and I'm sure yours too, it's the social determinants of health, right? We need every child to get the education and the health care and the nutrition, and to have the family stability, and to have the opportunities that they can become a thriving, contributing citizen and leader in our communities. The more we can invest that time to talk about how do we all connect, and so that we can see if there are gaps, and we can hopefully lean into those gaps, but also see where, hey, maybe Gleaners is doing this part really, really well, and we can step back and let them go ahead and lead in that area. Maybe they need a little support on the side, and how can we do that? I think that's exciting, because we're all working towards the same goals. I think we also have to remember that without access to the foods that you all provide, people are making logical choices based on the access that they have. The foods that are most shelf stable often may not be the healthiest, right? Or they may be, the low cost foods may be high sugar and high fat. And, we also pay attention to childhood obesity rates in our state. And that's a concern for the Hoosier state. And that's something that has long-term health impacts.
And I wonder, since you're in the business of communicating resources and programs and so on the education side, do you see opportunities where we might build on things like that and communicate in some coordinated way to shared audiences?
One of the neat things that we do is they're called youth worker cafes. They're like lunch and learns all over the state. And we do about 200 of them a year. So I'm wondering if there's kind of a series we might be able to do where we promote that and talk about, do you understand what resources are available, and here's an easy tool, and how do you use this?
And I think that actually is something that we could support with our dietitians.
Yes.
As well. Now, we're the only food bank in the state that has staff dietitians, but obviously that's not the only resource out there, and we would support our sister food banks elsewhere if need be. But I know, for example, there have been national sustainability and recycling programs that teach the kids first and then equip them to go home and teach. Are there things that we might empower youth to be the right messengers by learning first?
If you can set the right example and provide the right support at a young age, it can have a ripple effect. And again, in many families that we've seen or that we've heard about through our network, it's not that they don't want to provide the healthy food. Of course, everyone knows that food is nutrition, and it can be comfort and affection as well. And so it's just figuring out, where do you get that access, and what does that mean? And maybe that definition is a little different than what you grew up on, or what was shared with you. And so you have to develop that, right? And you have to give the tools to develop that, and then ensure that folks are comfortable living into it.
Yes.
And I remember we were talking about childhood obesity rates at one of those youth worker cafes, and there is a woman who works in an after-school program, and she said when she was younger, she had to go home. Her mother was working a couple of jobs, and her responsibility was to feed herself and her 2 siblings. And the closest thing to them was a fast food restaurant. So that's usually what they had for dinner, because it was easy, and she had homework to do, and the kids had homework to do. And so again, if that's your easy, logical choice, we need to have other options, right? And that's where we talk a lot about food deserts and food swamps. And so is there another choice that would be healthier, that we could support that young person in and that family in, so that wouldn't have been the easiest choice, right?
You know, if it's not that many years ago that there were no food pantries in this part of the state, at least. I don't speak nationally, but there weren't any in schools. And now we have 57 school-based pantries.
Congratulations.
And part of the reasoning to have them there is just what you said. They're easy to access, they're known, they're trusted locations. And an additional consideration for us is you can bring in wraparound services.
Yes.
Because families are dealing with other challenges. So what else can you bring that sort of checks an item off the list that family is struggling with? Here in Marion County, you have the Summer Youth Program Fund.
Yes.
There's a group of collaborative funders.
Yes.
And it's co-led by Lilly and the Indianapolis Endowment and the Indianapolis Foundation, but there are other funders and there are other providers. And there are well over 100 programs across Marion County that they had responsibility for teaching, for some educational impact while they had the kids under their responsibility in the summer, but they would feed them.
Yes.
And Indy Parks does a phenomenal job of feeding kids in this county. They're the largest single provider of meals, but Second Helpings is putting food in there too. But so is Gleaners. And we've added an element of nutrition classes. We can't scale them. So someday maybe we talk about how we might do that.
And someday, I was going to say someday, because I do think those food pantries on site at the schools are transformative, right? And really can be. So congratulations and thank you. But someday we need to talk about college students, right? And kids that are in school. And again, we're seeing more of that acknowledgement that hunger exists on college campuses, and how do we, one of the things that we work with Ivy Tech an awful lot on getting kids not only to school but to and through, and many university partners, but there's distinct needs there as well. So maybe that's another day when we start to scale that channel and keep building it out.
Well, I look forward to further discussion. I know there is more that Gleaners and Indiana Youth Institute can do together, but in the meantime, thank you so much for sharing your time and sharing great remarks for our audience.
What a pleasure. And thank you for everything you're doing, and congratulations.
Thank
we
you.
need more of it.